recorded, actually, this class, okay?
Okay.
So that you can go back and review it if you want. So I thought we would go through this chapter on financial management. I don't know if you've looked at these PowerPoints or not.
I haven't looked at the PowerPoints,
Okay.
but I did go through the chapter.
Okay, so let's just quickly review the chapter using the PowerPoint. And then what I'd like to do is go over the assignment and discuss the parts that you missed.
Okay.
Okay. Then we'll have an in-class activity, which is going to be like a quiz. It'll be a review quiz for pharmacy abbreviations, just to, you can't review those things enough. They have to be real second nature. Whether you're in the pharmacy or working as a medical assistant, you need to know them like second nature. So we'll go through that. And then at the end of the class, you can start working on your discussion for this week.
Okay.
And we'll stay on pretty much till 9:15 because those are the rules.
Okay.
The other thing is that I have reset the assessment so that you can do it 2 more times.
Okay.
Okay. And I've set all the assessments to being multiple tries because I want you to learn that material.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. So let's take a look first at this chapter. Pharmacists are more likely to be employees these days. It used to be that pharmacies were all independent businesses. They were run by the pharmacist. And when I was younger, many of them were what we called the drugstore, and the drugstore sold drugs. They didn't sell potato chips and clothing and cameras and everything else under the sun like Walgreens and stuff do. And they were independently owned by the pharmacist that did all the work, supervising the technicians that helped him. But now most of those have disappeared. It's a very expensive business to run. And the big chains, Walgreens, Rite Aid, CVS, et cetera, as well as the large multi-product stores, including grocery stores and Target and so forth, all have their own pharmacies and employ the pharmacists.
Okay.
But they still have to be aware of the financial aspects of running an organization because they're responsible for turning a profit for their employer. So first off, like any business, the products and services have to fit the needs of the customers, and you have to have experience and skills and so forth for your entire staff. We are concerned with productivity. In other words, keeping up with the rate of prescriptions that come into the pharmacy. If you're working in a doctor's office, it's keeping up with the customers, with the patients, getting the information as efficiently as possible, and then and putting it into a format that the doctor can use to do what they do. But quality is important. Service is critical. There's lots in the pharmacy. There are lots of alternatives. So if you go into a pharmacy and you don't get good service, you can always find another. And of course, price. Prices are, there's not that much competition between stores because the prices are really set on a national basis by the pharmaceutical companies. What they charge to the wholesalers, the supply chain goes from the pharmaceutical manufacturer to the wholesaler to the customer, in this case, the pharmacy. Now, sometimes there's a middle person in there. Some of the big pharmacy concerns will have their own warehousing. So they'll go to that warehouse and then go down to the individual pharmacies. So there's not a whole lot of room to compete on price.
Yeah.
What you see is places like Walmart will talk about, well, every drug is a $3 copay. Well, pretty much that made a lot of places do the same thing or something very similar to it. And the other part of it is that price is controlled by what the reimbursement, the insurers will reimburse the pharmacies for any one product. So price is not a big differentiator, but service and the ability to service to the customer and the ability to process a lot of customers efficiently is an important concern in managing a pharmacy. The cost analysis subject is something that we won't go into because it's a complex area. It just includes everything that goes into the cost, and that includes not just the cost of the drug. That pretty much is settled, but the cost of operations, what your rent is, your technology costs, even right down to how much it costs you to have a telephone in the pharmacy, and what the insurance companies are willing to reimburse. Cost control, again, there are some areas where you can affect control of your costs. One of those areas, of course, is staffing. Another is looking at controlling the amount of inventory on your shelves, because you have to buy it. Most pharmacies, when they take inventory, what they will do is they'll order the material from their wholesaler, and then they have 30 days to pay for it. So very often what you find is that the goal of any one pharmacy is to keep 1 month's supply of any product on the shelf. And then order, and you set limits. We talked about this in COM 103. You set some parameters for how much is the most you'll have. And when the level of inventory gets to a certain degree, you order more. So that's all about controlling your costs and keeping your inventory costs low, because inventory cost is carried on your books as an expense. And so you, in order to run a profitable business, you want the income every month to exceed your costs. And of course, the costs include, one of the other things you control is how much you pay your staff. And again, that depends on so many factors, and the cost of your facility. So there's a lot of things that you look at that. Cost control studies are generally handled at a very high level, so we won't talk about that. But costs themselves are divided into two major categories. Actually, three major categories. Direct costs. This is the cost of your people, the cost of your equipment, and the cost of materials that you're selling. So in other words, the cost of goods.
Okay.
Indirect costs are your overhead. There is what most organizations will do is overhead includes rent, and because most people don't own their stores. If they do, they're paying a mortgage, so that's part of the overhead. But the overhead includes the cost of your rent plus the associated costs of leasing a space from a company whose job it is to provide spaces for people to lease. Administration, these are the people that are managers. Sometimes we think managers basically are a drag on the organization. They just take money and they don't do much, but that's not quite true. It's an important sort of structural issue that we have to have somebody at the top who's making day-to-day decisions, and that's usually an administrator. Utilities are considered indirect because they vary all over the place, and it depends on how much you use. But it often in a pharmacy, like in a Walgreens, the pharmacy will be charged a proportion of the utilities and the overhead based on the square footage that they occupy in the store.
Okay.
So that's charged against the pharmacy. It's quite an accounting nightmare. And of course, maintenance is an indirect cost. It's unpredictable. Your computer goes down. You have to get it fixed. That's a maintenance issue.
Yeah.
A pipe breaks in the bathroom. That's a maintenance issue, and so forth. Then we have intangible costs, and these are something that are impossible to measure. One of the most common is the pain and suffering issue, and intangibles come in usually when you're facing a lawsuit, which hopefully you never will see in your life. You don't want it.
Yeah.
It's no fun. Purchasing procedures, there's lots of different ways. You can either do your purchasing yourself, either the technician alone or the pharmacist. Actually, the pharmacist has to be involved, especially with controlled substances. But you work directly with a pharmaceutical rep or a wholesaler. Group purchasing is when a large number of pharmacies or hospitals or both get together to make very large purchases and get discounts, because the more just the more of anything you buy, the cheaper it is. You can see that with say a 6-pack of soda at the store. If you try to buy a single bottle, it costs a lot more than 1/6 of a 6-pack.
Yeah.
And that's because you have costs for shipping all these things separately, costs for putting them separately on the shelf, etc. So what happens with drugs, and hospitals do this all the time, they get into these group purchasing organizations, and sometimes a hospital chain is its own group. I'm sure that UC Health or Banner up here buy an awful lot of stuff centrally and distribute it to their facilities. So with wholesale purchasing, what we have is, most of the time, if you order something from a wholesaler, they'll have it in stock. Wholesalers buy large volumes knowing that they're going to sell to a large number of customers. So in general, if you order something today, it'll be delivered the next morning.
Okay.
If you need it immediately, if it's an emergency, you can usually get it, if you're in any sort of metropolitan area, within about an hour, if it's necessary. It'll cost you more, but you can get it. Now, if you're in some place like Kettering or Kettering up in the mountains, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we have prime suppliers. Prime supplier is when you go to one source. I mean, there are all sorts of wholesalers, and there's all sorts of sources of drugs, but a prime supplier is someone with whom you negotiate a contract. And I did this down in Denver for College America, and negotiated a contract with Medline to buy the vast majority of the supplies we needed for teaching our students through them. And they gave me about a 15% discount versus what we were paying before.
Oh, wow.
So it was definitely worthwhile to have done that. We talked about inventory control. Inventory is merely a list of your items, but it also tells you how much. And your computer systems, as we saw in COM 103, keep a record of how much you have in stock and let you know when you need to reorder. The inventory keeps us honest about using our products. When we talk about legitimate use of products, there was a time when it was a major problem in any pharmacy that people would be stealing what are now controlled substances. The Controlled Substances Act didn't go into effect until 1970. What we called diversion was a major problem, and that is people basically stealing addictive drugs and selling them on the street. So our inventory control system, which we can use, you can check your inventory on a daily basis if you want, and some pharmacies will inventory Schedule II substances on a daily basis, just to be sure that things are not going missing, because the pharmacy is the group that gets whacked by the DEA and the Justice Department if their products disappear and they haven't been paying attention. So we want to control this. The other reason is that inventory errors, we have to report in our financial statements, we have to report the value of our inventory as part of our asset base. And it's also part of our liability base because we've paid for it.
Yeah.
If we don't have those numbers correct, our financial statements are wrong. And they can be either overstated or they can be understated. And the same thing when you go to do your taxes, you're overstating or understating your costs of operation, and therefore either overpaying or underpaying your taxes. Now, the IRS doesn't care if you overpay, but they get really nasty when you underpay.
Yeah.
So we want to watch these things. Okay. So, yeah, so they can lead that is so, and really it's a question of management. So we want to be sure that we do our financial stuff correctly. Now, another part of financial management is the part that we saw with the with COM 103 of submitting insurance reimbursement forms.
Mm-hmm.
In general, you can submit them in batches. Most of the forms for most drugs will allow you to put multiple prescriptions so that you're not filling out a reimbursement form every 5 minutes. So you can usually group them. With certain kinds of drugs, usually Schedule II substances, there's a limit as to how many can go in a batch. And I think that's 5. But nonetheless, another part of that is not just submitting the reimbursement forms, but recording, making certain that the payments have been made. So part of financially managing any medical office, and this includes pharmacies and private practices, rehab facilities, et cetera, is having someone whose job it is to follow up on all of these reimbursement requests that we make. And we do it all the time. In the pharmacy, you're sending them in usually several times a day because they will build up to a list that you simply submit. There is a form, the CMS 1500, which you probably have seen in one or more of your classes, especially your billing and coding class, that we actually use in the pharmacy as well as in the practice. So that's what I wanted to say about finances. Okay, any questions about that, Kat?
No.
Okay.
Think
Okay.
all makes sense.
Good. So let's go to the assignment.
Okay.
I took a quick look at the assignment. You have a grade of 100.2 out of 120, which is nothing to be ashamed of. But let's go take a look.
I could have done a little bit better.
Well,
I've paid attention and.
Good. Well, we'll take a look at this because I would like to just go over it. So let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, so right away, question one, good job,
Thank you.
good job. You had all those completely correct. So we'll skip on down and we'll go down. The next one, dosage form, high concentration of sugar and water. Excellent, yeah. Sort of like pancake syrup.
Yep.
Most common size of hypodermic syringes, sources of drugs, ophthalmic preparation. Yes, you got that. That's
Yeah.
good, isotonic. Okay, so let's take a look at 6. This is actually in my, I'm going to give you half credit on this. And the reason I'm going to is it's not a good, well-worded question.
Yeah, because it was like the newest thing is doing gene splicing and stem cell research.
Yep. Yeah, but and the only problem with that is the stem cells themselves aren't drugs.
Oh.
Okay, they're a therapy.
Okay.
That's it's a subtle difference, but it's a real.
Okay.
But in reality, these last two, I would argue that genetic engineering and genetic therapy is the newest area of drug origin.
Yeah.
But either of these would have been correct in my book. I'm
Okay.
still going to give you half credit for that one.
Okay.
Types of needles, disposable and non-disposable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. 3 names. Good. Excellent. You remembered that one. Form, properties, and desired effects. Yes. Excellent. Digoxin, yeah, comes from foxglove.
Yeah.
Suppository. Let's keep on going. Let's go down here. It turns out that gold is the drug, is the metal that's used to treat rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh.
In fact, it's injected right into the rheumatic joint.
Okay. Well,
As what we call it.
I looked this question up, and it didn't say like anything about it. And I looked up rheumatoid arthritis, and it like said nothing. So I'm like,
You
well,
took a guess.
I just took a guess.
Yeah. Well, you've ruled out 2 of them quite well. Mercury.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Well,
that's a
mercury
little
is
bit on the toxic side.
poison.
And then
Poisonous.
coal tar. Coal tar is actually used as a treatment for things like psoriasis, but it's only put on topically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
But gold is actually, there is a form of gold, we call it colloidal gold. It's very, very, very small particles so that you can actually inject it. And it's actually injected straight into the rheumatic joint.
Okay.
And I know a bit about this because my mother had very severe rheumatoid arthritis, and she was treated with gold as an injection. There are also a couple of oral forms of gold, but I don't think they do a good job of getting to the joint. So they're, even though they're there, they're not particularly effective for most people.
Yeah.
But
I
my
was
mother said
thinking
the
of
injections hurt.
Yeah, I was thinking of the like colloidal silver,
Yeah,
the stuff that you take,
yeah.
but yeah, I don't
The,
know.
the problem with colloidal silver and the silver particles is that silver actually is more toxic than gold.
Oh, okay.
So people that that use it, it's very effective at some things, but and it's a good it's actually a good bacteriostatic material.
Yeah.
There are people that are trying to impregnate, very nanoparticles of silver into things like socks so that
Oh,
the silver will keep feet from smelling bad inside shoes.
okay.
The problem is it washes out and ends
Yeah.
up going into the water system and ends up It's not cleaned by the sewage treatment plants.
Oh.
So it ends up in the water and it kills fish.
Oh.
So
Okay.
silver is pretty to look at, but it's a nasty stuff when it gets inside you. But
Yeah.
gold is pretty inert. And how nobody has any idea how it works in rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
But that's not uncommon. So let's keep on going. Once again, good job of matching.
Thank you.
And here we go. Yeah. So let's take a look at the drug interactions. I don't like their answer because it doesn't double, it's additive. In other words, whatever one does, the other will do, and the other one does, they'll simply add together. So it's a case of it's not doubling, but I would use additive, but that's all right. They don't cancel each other. That's antagonism.
Okay. Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like aspirin plus ibuprofen.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So, and acetaminophen and codeine is potentiation, meaning the acetaminophen actually prolongs the action of codeine.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it is a drug interaction.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you, once again, half credit. Calcium decreases the absorption. Yeah, it's of the antibiotic tetracycline. Actually, I don't think it has any effect at all on the absorption of vitamin A.
Okay.
Okay. Now we get down here to the pharmacokinetics subject here. Movement of a drug from site of administration into the blood is distribution. Absorption is when it actually moves. No, it's not. I mean, it's absorption, not distribution. Sorry, absorption. When they talk about absorption, it's when the blood gets into the blood, or the drug gets into the bloodstream.
Okay.
Okay. Distribution is when it's carried around the body and hopefully localizes where it's going to do its thing.
Yeah.
Although many drugs don't, they become systemic. But it's absorption. So with, the most obvious place of absorption is in the stomach because it takes a while to get the drug into circulation. But absorption also works for an IV drug. It's just that absorption is immediate.
Yeah.
It's going straight into the bloodstream. So that's the difference there. Half-life has nothing to do with absorption because the drug is taken up from wherever it is administered. If it's in the stomach, it's taken up and goes to the liver first. If it's by injection, say an intramuscular injection, over the course of 10 to 20 minutes, it's absorbed into the bloodstream. That's absorption. But the half-life is the amount of time that it takes for 1/2 of the drug in plasma to disappear through metabolism and excretion. So that is one of the things that tells us how long the drug will act. Not how it acts, just how long.
Yeah.
Okay. And our half-life is something that we measure first when we're developing a drug because it tells us how often we have to dose the patient.
Okay.
The object with any drug, I mean, ideally, to be honest, the ideal way for any drug to be dosed into a patient is through continuous infusion, through a pump, and getting exactly the right amount to stay in the plasma at all times.
Yeah.
That's not practical, obviously. You can't walk around carrying a pump. People on insulin do it all the time, but most people, not all the time, but a lot of diabetics will have an insulin pump. But most drugs, um, most people are not going to want to walk around with something pumping drug into them all the time. We had a drug when I was working at Burroughs Wellcome. We had a drug that was supposed to treat a disease called primary pulmonary hypertension, and the only treatment for that particular condition is a heart-lung transplant. Well, they're hard to come by. First off, it's nasty surgery, and there are only a few people that are really qualified to do it. But so the problem is keeping patients alive long enough to get to a heart-lung transplant. Well, we only have about 20 of those a year in the United States. So this is not going to be a drug that is, is going to be, easy to develop, and it won't be cheap. So we actually had a drug that would help patients, but the problem is due to the chemical nature of the drug, it had a half-life of measured in seconds, literally.
Yeah.
So so in these 20 patients a year, we just gave them a syringe, a wearable syringe pump that was driving this stuff continuously into them 24 hours a day, keeping them alive while they were waiting for their heart-lung transplant. It worked. Inconvenient, but it did work. These patients actually did well, but it was a drug that we gave away because we couldn't afford to spend the millions of dollars to develop it. So the FDA allowed us to give it to these 20 patients a year. So we did.
Okay.
So let's keep on going. P450, yes. Good. Yeah. And therein lies one of the discussion issues.
Yeah.
Surgical patients commonly receive more than 10 drugs. And this is including the ones they were on before they went in, obviously.
Yeah.
But then you're given heparin and antibiotics and all sorts of other goodies as well. Okay, specifics, okay, receptor, A and B, which one is that? Efficiency and efficacy and safety, yes. Thiamine. Okay. Here I wondered if you just didn't closely read the answer here. Analgesics is the answer. Analgesics are things like hydrocodone, oxycodone.
Okay.
Okay. Most antibiotics are not abused because you don't get anything, you don't get any joy out of taking them unless you're really sick and you get better. But you don't get any, there's no high.
I should have just, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wondered if you just, just misunderstood or didn't
Yeah,
look closely at the answers.
I think I just misunderstood.
Okay. In some ways, I could see that because, of course, the medical system has abused antibiotics by overprescribing them. So,
Yeah.
that's.
I think that's what I was thinking about. I was like over prescribing.
You know what? I'm going to give you half credit for that because that actually is a good perspective on the issue. Hopefully, we're getting beyond that now. So here we have 43, and there are some of them that you did not answer.
Yeah, I tried looking them up, and I just couldn't find the answer.
Okay.
So I just kind of gave up.
Okay.
But that's so bad, but it's like, what?
Yeah. Okay, so group purchasing would be groups of buyers working together to negotiate with the manufacturers to get better price. Okay,
Okay.
so that would be E. What's the next one here? Consigned inventory. Okay. That's really this one here, M. Enough inventory to allow the pharmacy to function, I think. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Okay.
Let's take a look at cost effectiveness analysis. That is G, the systematic process of evaluating costs and benefits to identify programs which benefits exceed the costs, right?
Okay.
All righty. Just-in-time inventory. Actually, that is M.
Okay.
Just-in-time inventory is just allowing enough to function until the next reorder. This comes out of actually post World War II Japan. Developed, that process was developed by an American economist by the name of Deming, who helped the Japanese automobile industry get back on its feet.
Okay.
And control inventory costs by saying, okay, on Monday we're going to need 4,000 wheel bolts, and so they'd be delivered Monday morning at the beginning of work. And then Tuesday you might say, okay, well, we're going to need 3,000 on Tuesday, so they would deliver exactly what was needed that day. So they had basically no inventory, zero inventory. Okay. Let's see if we have. All right, so we had thought that that was going to be consigned inventory. That would be number C, pharmacy products still owned by the manufacturer, but they're set aside for the purchaser when they need them. Okay. Cost factors. These include quality and scope, and as well as output. And pharmacist manager obviously is going to be whoever's left. Let's see where he is responsible for the finances of the pharmacy, B.
Okay.
So anyway, so they've got you down here. You left this blank. So you've got E, group buyers, right, etc. So we went through that. Affordable prices. Down here, there's one or two. Okay. All right. Following advantage of the independent purchasing. You said no handling fees. Well, when you're an independent purchaser, you're taking care of all that. The biggest advantage disadvantage to independent purchasing is that you don't get the lower prices that come from big group purchases.
Okay.
And a difference of 10% in pricing can be the difference between profit and failure.
Yeah.
Okay. Higher cost, blah, okay. Which of the following enables hospitals to reduce inventory costs since a larger portion is maintained on their behalf?
So with this question, I selected wholesale purchasing. I second guessed myself, and then I put primary
Prime
suppliers.
suppliers, yeah. Prime suppliers can help reduce inventory costs, but you're not, the wholesale purchasing is, even when you buy from several suppliers, if you're buying large enough amounts, it's cheaper to use wholesale purchasing.
Okay.
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 All right. So we added a bit of about 1.2 points or about 2.3 points to your
Yeah.
score. So I'm going to update that. And then I'm going to go back to there. And it updated. Excellent. So you have your week 1 assessment. As I said, you can do that again, twice more if you want.
Okay.
Let's go over here. Ah, 3 out of 3 on your daily checkpoints. Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go do a couple of things and then take a break and then do the
Okay.
in-class quiz.
Okay.
Let me go back to modules. Let's look at the discussion first. You're quite familiar with the discussions. It's going to be hard for, well, you won't be able to do 2 responses, and I won't, I'm not going to require anything like that. It would be useful if you looked at my post and made a comment on that.
Yeah.
But if you,
And then I can make my post. I started on it, but
oh,
then
good.
haven't finished it yet.
Okay,
So,
well, you'll get a chance to finish it tonight. So,
yeah.
So, I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say about surgical patients and hospitalized patients being high risk. There's several reasons for that, not just all the drugs they're on, but that's a major part of it. And then finding this article, the research here. Don't overthink the research. Just find something that answers the question of a severe drug interaction. The example that I gave in my post is a single patient, but it was a pretty severe reaction. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the article about the outcome for that poor patient. But that's it. I mean, and these drug interactions can range anywhere from making people mildly ill to killing them. So
Yeah.
what you want to do is look for one that's interesting. I had a student one time that would try to find the grossest story she could to try and embarrass me or gross me out. She didn't realize that I used to be a platoon sergeant. I can't be grossed out.
Yeah. So my brother's ex-girlfriend's grandma, she was prescribed this medication, and it made her internally bleed.
Ooh.
Like something went wrong, and she was almost on her deathbed.
Mm.
And then I think she stopped taking the medication or something, and now she's back to normal.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but yeah, the doctors messed up.
That unfortunately is altogether too common.
Yeah.
So, let's see. All right, so there's that. Let's go back. Okay. We look here in the readings and tools again. Obviously, you didn't have any trouble getting these workbook pages and filling them out.
So I didn't do the workbook pages. I just did. I went to into the book,
Right.
And then with doing Control F, you can search for the keyword,
Right.
and then look through. So yeah, and I don't have a printer, so I can't print off the pages.
Right. Yeah.
It's useless to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And not being able to be on campus means you can't print them
Yeah,
there. So, well, it sounds like you figured out how to do it because you did just fine on the assignment.
yeah. And
So,
I've taken this class before. It's just the fact that I didn't pass it. I
oh,
failed. So
was it an online class
um I think so.
or was that one you had to withdraw from?
I think I withdrew from it.
That might have
I
been one of
think
my
this was
classes.
when I think this is when my grandpa passed away.
Ah, yeah.
I withdrew from it because yeah,
I remember that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Because I think I was the instructor in that class.
I think so. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're having a chance to finish it now.
Yeah.
Okay. So that you figured out that one. So what I would suggest right now is we take a 10-minute break
Okay.
and then we'll come back and talk about the in-class activity and I'll set you off on that. Okay.
Okay.
Great. So we'll take a 10-minute break.
Okay. Sweet.